had always known that family gatherings would become a battleground after Dad's passing, but I never expected it to happen so soon. His absence still hung heavily in the air like a thick fog. The house, once warm with his voice, now felt cold and distant. Even the familiar smell of his cologne seemed to have disappeared with him. And I wasn't the only one feeling the weight of his absence. My brother, Daniel, had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in Dad's eyes. The one who could walk into a room and everyone would smile at his presence, expecting greatness. I had learned to live in his shadow. But since Dad's death, something had changed in Daniel. He was different now. Arrogant. Dismissive. He had always been a little self-absorbed, but now it was as if he'd abandoned any trace of humility or respect for the values Dad had tried so hard to instill in us. The family had gathered at the house for the reading of Dad's will, and as usual, it was Daniel who dominated the conversation. He sat at the head of the table, exuding an air of self-assuredness that, to me, felt more like a mask than anything else. I could tell that something was brewing within him, but I couldn't quite place what it was. Whatever it was, it wasn't good. I had spent years watching Daniel receive the best of everything. The best grades, the best opportunities, the best praise. I had learned to accept my role as the backup, always in the background, never quite as important. But now, after Dad was gone, I thought things would change. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could finally stand up and make my voice heard. But every time I tried to speak, Daniel would cut me off, dismissing my concerns with a flick of his hand as if they were unimportant. The reading of the will had gone as expected. Daniel received the lion's share of the inheritance. He had always been the one Dad had relied on most. But then, something happened that sent a shock through me. When the lawyer finished reading Dad's final wishes, Daniel stood up and casually announced that he intended to sell the family home. The house I had spent my childhood in, the place where so many of our memories had been created, was no longer important to him. To Daniel, it was just another asset to liquidate. "I don't see why we should keep it," Daniel said, his voice flat. "I'm going to sell it, and we'll divide the proceeds. It's just taking up space." I could feel my blood boiling. How could he be so callous? Did he not understand the significance of this house? It wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was our family's history. It was where we had laughed, cried, and celebrated. How could he just throw it away like that? I spoke up, my voice shaking with anger. "You can't just sell it, Daniel. This house means something to all of us. It was Dad's dream, his legacy. And you're just going to toss it aside like it's nothing?" Daniel turned to me, his eyes narrowed, and a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Oh please, stop with the sentimentality. This house is just a bunch of old rooms filled with memories. What's it really worth now, anyway?" His words hit me like a slap in the face. I felt a surge of frustration rise within me, a feeling I couldn't suppress any longer. I had spent my whole life being pushed aside by Daniel, but now, it felt like he was doing the same thing to our father's memory. It was as if he was erasing everything that mattered to me, and I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. "Your late father would be ashamed of you," I said before I could stop myself. The words flew out of my mouth, harsh and unforgiving. "You've completely forgotten what he stood for. What he taught us. It's like you don't even care." For a moment, there was silence. Daniel's face froze, his expression one of disbelief. I could see the muscles in his jaw tighten as he clenched his teeth, trying to hold it together. But then, something shifted. I saw the crack in his armor, the vulnerability he had been hiding beneath the surface. His eyes glistened for a second, and my heart skipped a beat. Was he crying? Before I could react, Daniel stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. He stormed out of the room, not looking back. The door slammed behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty house. I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. The tension in the air was suffocating. I had never seen Daniel like this. In all our years growing up, I had never seen him so fragile. I had always believed he was invincible, perfect, in a way. But now, I wasn't so sure. I could hear the sound of his footsteps retreating down the hallway, but I didn't follow. I didn't know what to say or do. My heart felt heavy, a mix of guilt and anger swirling inside me. Had I gone too far? I had never intended to hurt him, but I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I walked away from the table, the words I had said still echoing in my mind. Your late father would be ashamed of you. Those words would haunt me, I was sure of it. But in that moment, I didn't regret them. Daniel needed to hear the truth, even if it broke him. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The beginning of something I wasn't ready to face, but something that had to be done. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew that the family I had once known was slipping further away with each passing day. And Daniel, my brother, was at the center of it all. The night air was cold as I walked aimlessly down the street, my thoughts swirling like the autumn leaves around my feet. I had hoped that once I walked away from the house, the anger would fade, that the knot in my stomach would loosen, but it only seemed to tighten. The words I had spoken to Daniel felt like they were still hanging in the air, heavy and unforgiving. Your late father would be ashamed of you. I couldn't believe I had said them, but deep down, I knew they were true. The truth had always been uncomfortable in our family, but this time, it felt necessary. I found myself standing outside a small coffee shop, the lights from the inside casting a warm glow on the sidewalk. It wasn't the kind of place I usually frequented, but something about the familiarity of it calmed me. I pushed open the door and entered, the warmth enveloping me. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in days. I ordered a coffee, sitting down at a small table near the window, and let my mind wander. What had happened to us? To our family? To Daniel? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much things had changed since Dad's death. In the beginning, I had believed that the grief would bring us closer together, that it would unite us in a shared loss. But now, it felt like the opposite was happening. Daniel had become someone I didn't recognize. The brother I had grown up with, who had always been charming, charismatic, and driven, was now a stranger to me. He had always been the one who got what he wanted, who received Dad's attention and approval, but now it felt like he was willing to erase everything for his own gain. I hadn't seen him since the argument. After he stormed out, I had tried to call him, to apologize for the harshness of my words. But each time, the call went straight to voicemail. I couldn't help but wonder if he was avoiding me on purpose. Part of me wanted to believe that he just needed time to cool off, but another part of me feared that what I had said had struck too deep. Maybe I had done irreparable damage to our relationship. As I sipped my coffee, I thought back to the good times. When we were kids, things had been different. Daniel and I had spent hours playing in the backyard, getting into trouble together, and sharing secrets. It was hard to reconcile that carefree version of him with the man he had become. He had always been ambitious, but somewhere along the way, that ambition had turned into something darker. It wasn't just about success anymore, it was about power. Control. I was pulled from my thoughts by the sound of my phone vibrating on the table. It was a text message from Mom. I'm worried about Daniel. He's not answering my calls, and he's been distant. Please, can you talk to him? I stared at the message, the words sinking in like a weight in my chest. My mother had always been the one to try to keep the peace, to smooth over the cracks in our family, but now it seemed like even she was starting to see the cracks in Daniel's armor. I didn't know if I should respond, but I felt a strange obligation to do something. I quickly typed out a reply. "I tried, Mom. He won't talk to me. He's shutting everyone out." I hesitated before sending the message, unsure of what else to say. I didn't want to add to her worry, but I couldn't lie to her either. Daniel had changed. And I didn't think it was just grief. It was something deeper. Something that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Mom's reply came almost immediately. "I don't know what to do anymore. He's so different. Please, try again. I'm scared for him." I sat back in my chair, the weight of her words settling over me. I had spent so long resenting Daniel for the attention and approval he always seemed to receive, but now I saw the truth: he was falling apart. And I had no idea how to help him. I didn't even know if I wanted to help him. The man he had become was so far removed from the brother I had known, and it was hard to bridge the gap. But I couldn't ignore the fact that Daniel needed help. He was too proud to ask for it, too stubborn to admit that he was struggling. I had been just as stubborn, unwilling to admit that I missed the way things used to be. But now, looking at the text from Mom, I knew that we were both in the same boat. We were grieving, but we were also losing each other in the process. I finished my coffee and stood up, pulling my jacket tighter around me as I stepped back into the cold night. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure: I had to find a way to reach Daniel. I couldn't let him spiral down this path alone, even if I didn't understand him anymore. He was still my brother, and I still cared about him. I walked back toward my car, my mind racing with thoughts of what to say to him, how to break through the walls he had built around himself. I had no answers, only questions. But I couldn't give up on him, no matter how much he pushed me away. The family we had once been was still out there, buried beneath the bitterness and resentment. I just had to find a way to bring it back to the surface. As I drove back home, the streets of the city passing by in a blur, I made a promise to myself: I would talk to Daniel. No matter how much it hurt, no matter how difficult it was, I would find a way to get through to him. Because if I didn't, I feared we would both lose everything: our past, our family, and maybe even each other. The following morning, I woke up with a heavy heart. The coldness of the night hadn't gone away, and the knot in my stomach was still there, lingering like a persistent shadow. I sat up in bed, looking out the window at the gray skies. It felt like the world was mirroring what was happening inside me. I hadn't slept well, the weight of everything I had said to Daniel and the uncertainty about how things would unfold gnawing at me. I reached for my phone, the first thing I did every morning now, hoping for some sign, some word from Daniel. But the screen was blank, no new messages, no missed calls. I had to admit it: he was avoiding me. It had been 2 days since I had spoken to him last, and there had been no sign that he was willing to reach out. It was painful, the silence between us, but I couldn't let it go on forever. I needed to talk to him. There was no point in waiting around. I grabbed my jacket and left the apartment, stepping into the cool morning air. I had no idea what I was going to say to him, but I couldn't keep sitting in the shadows of our broken relationship. Something had to change. I drove to his house, the streets quieter than usual as I made my way through the city. It felt strange, this sense of purpose. I had never felt so unsure about something that seemed so necessary. I had never been the one to chase after reconciliation. Daniel had always been the one who sought out the peace, who did the talking when we were younger. But now, the roles had shifted. Now, it was me who had to break through the distance. When I reached his place, I parked the car and sat there for a moment. I looked up at the building, my mind racing. Should I just knock on the door, or was there a better way to approach this? I didn't want to seem like I was forcing my way in, but I knew if I waited too long, it would be even harder to make the first move. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, walking up to the door. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I considered turning back. What if he refused to talk to me? What if he was still angry, still hurt by the things I had said? But then I remembered the desperation in Mom's voice when she texted me. I'm scared for him. That was all the motivation I needed. I knocked on the door, my hand shaking slightly as I stood there. I waited, the silence stretching on longer than I had expected. Just as I was about to turn around and leave, I heard footsteps from inside, the sound of locks being undone, and the door creaked open. Daniel stood there, looking at me with an unreadable expression. His eyes were red, like he hadn't been sleeping either. He was wearing a hoodie, his posture slumped, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. What do you want? He asked, his voice flat, distant. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I had come here expecting to have the right words, but now that I was face to face with him, they didn't seem to matter. I wanted to talk, I said, my voice quiet. I know you're upset with me, but I didn't come here to fight. I just want to talk. He scoffed, shaking his head. Talk? About what? How you think I've turned into some kind of monster? Is that it? His words stung, but I didn't back down. No, Daniel. I didn't say that. I just think you're lost right now. And I want to help you. He laughed bitterly, taking a step back and crossing his arms. Help me? You've done enough helping, haven't you? Telling me what my father would think of me, as if you have any idea. I winced, the memory of my words hitting me harder than I expected. I had known they were cruel when I said them, but I hadn't realized just how much they had cut until now. I shouldn't have said that, I admitted, taking a step forward. I was angry, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. Daniel's gaze flickered for a moment, and I could see a flash of pain in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that familiar wall he had built around himself. You can apologize all you want, but that doesn't change anything. You don't know what it's been like for me, for all of us. You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted to lose Dad? You think I wanted everything to fall apart? I could see that he was holding back tears, the emotion just below the surface. It was the first time I had seen him so vulnerable, and for a moment, I almost reached out to comfort him. But I didn't. I had no idea how to. I never said it was easy, Daniel, I said softly. I know you're hurting. But we're both hurting. And we're letting it drive us apart. His eyes flickered, and I could see him struggling with the words. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know how to fix this. I took a deep breath. I don't know either. But I'm not going to give up on you. I'm not going to give up on us. There was a long silence between us, the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. I could see the walls slowly starting to crack, but they weren't coming down just yet. I don't know if I can trust you again, he said quietly, almost to himself. The words hit me harder than I expected. But I wasn't going to back down. You don't have to trust me right now, I said. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, it felt like we were finally making progress. But then, before I could say anything else, he stepped back, shutting the door in my face. I stood there, staring at the door, my heart pounding. I had made an attempt. But I didn't know if it was enough. I didn't know if he was ready to let me back in. As I walked back to my car, I felt a mix of frustration and relief. The conversation hadn't gone the way I had hoped, but at least it was a start. Maybe things would get better. Maybe they wouldn't. But I couldn't stop trying. I couldn't give up on my brother, no matter how much it hurt. I woke up the next morning with a sense of urgency I couldn't quite explain. The conversation with Daniel had left a mark on me, but it wasn't the closure I had been hoping for. I could still hear the pain in his voice, the way his words had cut deep, even though I knew I had hurt him too. But there was a lingering feeling that we weren't done yet, that there was more to this than just the distance between us. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just walk away and pretend everything would fix itself. Not after everything we'd been through, not after everything that had happened with Dad. So, I decided that today, I would do something different. I would confront the issue head-on, not just with Daniel but with myself. I needed to face the truth, whatever it was, and be honest, not just with him but with myself. I spent the day thinking about everything. About how I had always been the one to try to keep the peace, about how Daniel had always been the one to bury his emotions, to keep everything locked up inside. I remembered the years we had spent trying to live up to Dad's expectations, trying to be perfect, trying to be the children he wanted us to be. But now, everything had changed. Dad was gone, and we were left to pick up the pieces, and I wasn't sure we were doing it right. By the time evening came, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't stay in this limbo any longer. I had to go back to him, even if it meant facing the pain again, even if it meant risking everything. I just had to know if there was a chance for us to fix this. I drove to Daniel's place, the same nervous energy creeping up my spine, the same uncertainty making my hands shake as I gripped the steering wheel. I parked my car outside his building, this time with no plan other than to speak from the heart. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I had to try again. When I knocked on the door, my heart was in my throat. The waiting felt endless, but finally, the door creaked open. Daniel stood there, looking surprised, his face softening just slightly when he saw it was me. But there was still that distance between us, that invisible wall he had built ever since the day I had confronted him about Dad. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice cold but with a hint of something deeper, something I couldn't quite place. "I came because I can't leave things like this, Daniel," I said, my voice steady, though I could feel the vulnerability creeping in. "I know I hurt you, and I know I said things I shouldn't have, but I can't just walk away." He looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether to let me in, whether to let the words fall between us. And then, finally, he stepped back and motioned for me to come in. I entered his apartment slowly, my eyes scanning the familiar surroundings that now felt so different. Everything seemed quieter now, emptier. The air was thick with the weight of everything unsaid. "I'm not sure what you expect from me," he said, sitting down on the couch. "You want me to just forgive you? To forget what you said to me?" I hesitated before sitting down across from him. "No. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even expect you to understand. But I need you to know that I didn't mean what I said. I was angry. And I took it out on you, and I'm sorry for that. You're my brother, Daniel. And I've been so focused on everything else that I forgot to be there for you." He didn't say anything for a long time, his eyes fixed on the floor. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. "I don't know how to forgive you," he finally said, his voice strained. "You don't get it. You don't understand what it's like to feel like I've lost everything. Dad, the business, everything I worked for. You don't know what it's like to feel like you've been carrying the weight of the world and still not be enough." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had known he was struggling, but hearing him say it out loud, hearing the pain in his voice, made it so much more real. I know, I said quietly, my heart aching for him. I don't know what it's like to carry that weight. But I know what it's like to feel like everything is falling apart. And I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough. There was a long pause as we both sat there, each of us trying to process everything. Finally, Daniel looked up at me, his eyes full of pain but also something else, something I hadn't expected. I didn't want to be like Dad, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. I didn't want to be the one who always expected perfection, who always pushed everyone away. But I did it anyway. And now I'm just like him. I could see the shame in his eyes, the weight of his own guilt pressing down on him. It was the first time I had seen him truly vulnerable, and it broke my heart. You're not him, Daniel, I said, my voice firm. You're your own person. And you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to be imperfect. Just like I am. He didn't respond right away, but the tension in the room seemed to shift. For the first time in a long time, it felt like there was a glimmer of hope between us. I don't know how to fix everything, he said softly, his gaze still fixed on me. But maybe we can start over. Maybe we can try to figure this out together. I felt a rush of relief, the knot in my stomach loosening just slightly. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on the same page again. I don't know where we go from here either, I said, my voice softening. But I'm not giving up on you, Daniel. I'm not giving up on us. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else. But instead, he just nodded, as if agreeing with the unspoken promise between us. We didn't have all the answers, and we didn't have everything figured out. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. I ask everyone who likes our content to subscribe to the channel, it will help us a lot, and it will be a pleasure to have you here with us.